Hello everybody and welcome to today's Daf on a sleety, rainy, windy day here, doing Shevuout Daf 36 Amud B. So let's dive straight in. So it says, rather nevertheless reverse the attribution of the opinions in the Mishnah and say that Rabbi Meir deems the witness exempt from liability for an oath of testimony, as even in ritual matters, Rabbi Meir does not accept the principle. From a negative statement you can infer a positive statement. And Vin objects to this. And in ritual matters, does Rabbi Meir not accept the principle? But if that is so, with regard to the halacha, that priests who perform the temple service while intoxicated with wine, so what's the footnote? Shevuout Yayin. The verse states, no, drink no wine, no strong drink, you nor your sons with you when you enter into the tent of meeting, that you shall not die. Leviticus 10:9. But it does not state what their punishment is if they enter while intoxicated. From the negative one can infer the positive. If they enter the tent of meeting intoxicated, they will be liable to receive death at the hand of heaven. With regard to one who performs the temple service with overgrown hair, the halacha is derived by means of a juxtaposition in the book of Ezekiel 44:20-21 between overgrown hair and drinking wine. Shevuout Yayin. It is prohibited for any priest fit for temple service who became intoxicated to enter the temple beyond the altar. If he performs a temple service, his service is disqualified and he is liable to receive death at the hand of heaven, as it is written, drink no wine or strong drink, you nor your sons with you, when you enter into the tent of meeting, that you should not die. In Leviticus 10:9. This is the halacha, provided that he drank in one sitting 1/4 log of undiluted wine that was aged for at least 40 days. And that's in the Ram Sefer Vod Hilchot Beis HaMikdash 1:1. And the priests who perform the temple service with overgrown hair on their head, Peruei Rosh. Prohibited for any priest who is allowed his hair to grow for 30 days to enter the temple beyond the altar. If he performs the temple services, his service is disqualified, and he is liable to receive death at the hand of heaven, just like one who performed the temple service while intoxicated. Roman Sefer Vod Hilchot Beis HaMikdash 1:8. Who based on this principle are liable to receive death at the hand of heaven. So too do Rabbi Meir not accept this principle. But then we learn in a Braita, and these are they who are liable to receive death at the hand of heaven: priests who perform the temple service while intoxicated with wine, and priests who perform the temple service with overgrown hair on the head. And Rabbi Meir does not disagree with that ruling, rather actually reverse. So what does that mean? Rather actually reverse. Rashi explains that on this basis the Mishnah must be understood in reference to a prohibition that involves monetary matters, such as in the case of a sota. That is the version cited by the early commentaries in the name of Rashi. Sota and witnesses are different. The Mishnah could not have been left without revision, as if the reference in the Mishnah were to a matter that is only ritual in nature. Why do the rabbis deem him exempt? As Gemara says, everyone agrees in ritual matters. From the negative you can infer the positive. Hananel cites a variant reading, which also appears in the commentary of the Ramban. See Tosfot. Rather, actually do not reverse. The early commentaries explain that the rabbis deem him exempt not because they reject the principle from negative you can infer the positive in cases involving ritual matters, rather they deem him exempt for different reasons. Tosfot and the Rambam. Rashba lauded the explanation of the Rambam based on the verse with regard to an oath of testimony, and he hears the voice of an oath. Leviticus 5:1, which indicates that he must hear the oath directly and not arrive at the oath by inference. See the writ for the attribution of the witnesses in the Mishnah, and say that Rabbi Meir deems the witness exempt from liability of an oath of testimony. When Rabbi Meir does not accept that principle, it is only in case involving monetary matters, but in case involving ritual matters, he accepts the principle. That is the reason he does not dispute halacha in the Braita with regard to a priest intoxicated with wine with the overgrown hair on his head. And the reason that he does not accept the principle from a negative statement you can infer a positive statement in the case of a sota is that sota is different because it's a ritual matter in which there are implications involving monetary matters, i.e. payment of a marriage contract. The same is true with regard to an oath of testimony in the Mishnah. Although it is a ritual matter, it is a ritual matter with ramifications involving monetary matters. And now I'm going to summarize the chapter 9. Since it is written, and he is a witness, it is apparent that the halacha of an oath of testimony applies only to those who are fit to testify in a case being adjudicated. Therefore, those who are unfit to testify in general, e.g., women, Canaanite slaves, and the wicked, and those whose actions disqualify them from giving testimony by Torah law, e.g., robbers, and those whose actions disqualify them by rabbinic law, e.g., gamblers, as well as the king who does not testify, are not included in this halacha. The same is true for those who are disqualified from testifying in that specific case, e.g. a relative, or one with a vested interest in the outcome of the case. One is liable for taking a false oath of testimony only for testimony involving monetary matters, even though there is a mitzvah to testify in cases involving all types of testimony, provided that the plaintiff is able to collect his debt from the defendant based on that testimony. Therefore, there is no difference whether the plaintiff demands that they testify with regard to monetary debt, or he demands payment of a fine, as in both cases the witnesses are liable for taking a false oath of testimony. There is no liability if the loan is with regard to a commitment that is not enforceable, or when the defendant is exempt from payment for a different reason, e.g. he performed a transgression for which he is liable to be executed. For the same reason, the halakha of an oath of testimony apply only to two witnesses capable with their testimony of obligating the defendant to pay, and only when there are no other witnesses capable of providing the same testimony. The witness is liable for denying knowledge of the matter only when he falsely declares in court that he does not have knowledge of the matter. He is not liable for denial elsewhere. Likewise, if he took an oath that he would not testify, he is not liable for taking a false oath of testimony, but he is liable for taking an oath in vain. With regard to an oath of testimony, there is no difference whether the witnesses take the oath themselves or whether they have the oath administered to them by another and they assent. But there is no oath of testimony unless the plaintiff himself, not another individual, and not even his son, designates them as his witnesses beforehand and demands that they take an oath. The oath only takes effect with regard to testimony that exists at the time of the oath, and not with regard to testimony concerning an incident that will transpire in the future. While there is no fixed formula for this oath, it must include an invocation of the name of God and appellation that relates exclusively to God. Therefore, an oath in the name of the Torah is not an oath, but an oath in the name of he who gave the Torah is an oath. With regard to one who curses a Jew, whether he curses himself or he curses another is considered a curse if he employs any of the names or appellations of God. By contrast, with regard to one who curses his father or his mother, he is liable to be stoned only if he curses them by invoking the name of God. It is a curse only if he states the curse explicitly, and none of the curse may only be inferred from his statement. A witness is liable for taking a false oath of testimony only if he denies knowledge intentionally, whether it's completely intentional or whether he intentionally denied knowledge of the testimony, but did not know that he would be liable to bring an offering for taking a false oath. One who forgot about the matter and thought he was taking a true oath is exempt. A witness who takes a false oath is liable to bring a sliding scale offering for atonement. One who takes several false oaths with regard to one matter is liable to bring only one offering, but if several oaths are administered with regard to different details of the matter, he is liable to bring an offering for each and every oath. In the analysis of the halachot of the names and appellations of God, the Gemara defined the sacred names of God that may not be erased, and noted that in different places in the Bible, not all instances in which the name of God appears is in fact the sacred name. In the course of delineating halachot of testimony, there was extensive discussion of the verse, "Distance yourself from a false matter" in Exodus 23:7, which includes many different matters. Fundamentally, one must distance himself from any matter that is not true, and even from a matter that causes a miscarriage of justice, even if it is completely false. And now we move on to the introduction to Perek 5. So it is Perek 4 that, not Perek 9, my mistake. If anyone sin and commit a trespass against the Lord and deal falsely with his neighbor in a matter of deposit, or of pledge, or of robbery, or have oppressed his neighbor, or have found that which was lost, and deal falsely therein, and swear to a lie, in any of all these that a man does, sinning therein, then it shall be, if he had sinned and is guilty, and he shall restore that which he took by robbery, or the thing that he has gotten by oppression, or the deposit that was deposited with him, or the lost thing that he found, or of anything about which he has sworn falsely, he shall even restore it in full, and shall add the fifth part more to it, unto him to whom it appertains that he shall give it in the day of his being guilty. And he shall bring his forfeit unto the Lord, a ram without blemish out of the flock, according to evaluation, for a guilt offering unto the priest. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven concerning whatsoever he does so as to be guilty thereby. And that's in Leviticus 5:21-26. This chapter discusses the halachot of an oath on a deposit, i.e. a case where a claimant sues the defendant for a monetary claim, and the defendant takes the false oath denying the claim and subsequently admits his lie. As stated in the Torah, these halachot apply only to an oath taken with regard to a deposit. So it applied not only to an oath taken with regard to deposit, but to several monetary claims that one denies by oath, e.g. pledges or lost or stolen items. In fact, the guilt offering that the defendant must bring for transgressing prohibition against taking a false oath on deposit is referred to as a guilt offering for robbery. The details with regard to the offering itself, as well as the halachot with regard to the 1/5 additional payment that must be paid by the defendant, are found in the 9th chapter of Tractate Bava Kama. Several questions are raised in this chapter with regard to halachot of an oath on a deposit. Who may become liable for taking a false oath on a deposit? Does the denial have to take place in the presence of a court? Do these halachot apply to all monetary claims or to certain types? Is one liable only if he took an oath intentionally, or is he liable if he took it unwittingly? And what constitutes intent with regard to this oath? With regard to the liability itself, the Gemara examines in which instances the defendant is liable to bring an offering for taking a false oath on a deposit. It also analyzes the extent of the defendant's liability in the case that he denied a claim multiple times or denied multiple claims, whether he is liable to bring multiple offerings or if a single offering suffices. These are the primary matters that are addressed in this chapter, although other halachic issues which derive from these halachot are also discussed. So let's go. Mishnah. Shevuout Daf noheges ba'anashim ubnoshim b'chorchim ubekrovim b'shevim ufiftulim. One who takes a false oath denying that he is in possession of an item that another deposited with him is liable to return the item with an additional 1/5 of its value and to bring a guilt offering. See Leviticus 5:20-26. The halachot of an oath on a deposit apply to men. Noheges ba'anashim v'chule. Rashi points out that this clause is in fact unnecessary. Since this type of oath involves a denial of a monetary claim, there would be no reason to distinguish between different types of people. He explains that this language parallels language in the Mishnah about oath of testimony in 30a, where the distinction between men and women is relevant, and to women and to non-relatives and to relatives. I.e., even if the owner of the deposit and the purported bailee are related, to those fit to serve as witnesses and to those disqualified from doing so. These halachot apply when the oath is taken in the presence of a court, and when not taken in the presence of a court, as long as the oath is taken on his own, i.e. stated by the defendant himself. But if the oath is administered by others, mipi asma mipi achevim, an oath taken on one's own involves a case where one takes an oath outright, or another administers the oath, and he was told amen. The oath administered by others, the claimant administers an oath, but the defendant does not say amen. Rather, he states that what the claimant stated when administering the oath is false. He is not liable unless he denies the claim in court. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say both when the defendant takes an oath on his own, one is liable for taking a false oath on a deposit, whether he denies the claim and takes the oath himself, or whether the claimant administers the oath to him in court, even if he did not respond amen. This ruling is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis Rambam Sefer Flor Hilchot Shevuot 7:1. And when the oath is administered by others, once he has falsely denied the claim against him, he is liable to bring a guilt offering and to pay restitution and an additional 1/5, even if the oath was not administered in the presence of a court. And one is liable to bring an offering for unwittingly taking a false oath on a deposit. If one takes a false oath on a deposit, he is liable to pay the principal and an additional 1/5 of that which he denied owing. And he must bring a guilt offering to atone for his transgression. He is liable whether he took the false oath intentionally or unwittingly, provided he was aware at the time of his oath that the deposit was in his possession. If he forgot that the deposit was in his possession, or he was not aware of the prohibition against taking a false oath in denial of a monetary claim, he is considered the victim of circumstances beyond his control and he is exempt. What is the case of an unwitting false oath on a deposit? It is where the purported bailee was unaware that one is liable to bring an offering for a false oath, but he knew that taking the false oath is prohibited and that the deposit was in his possession. What was the case of an intentional false oath on a deposit? It is where he knew that one is liable to bring an offering from Sefer Shevuot 1:9-11. On deposit and for unwittingly taking a false oath. I've said that. About the intention misappropriation of the deposit, i.e. if one knowingly took a false oath but was unaware that he is liable to bring an offering for taking the oath, but he is not liable for unwittingly taking a false oath by itself, where he mistakenly thought that he did not owe anything. And what is he liable for when he intentionally takes a false oath? He must bring a guilt offering worth at least 2 silver shekels. One who denies that a sum of money was deposited in his possession and takes a false oath to that effect, whether intentionally or wittingly, must bring a guilt offering of a 2-year-old ram worth 2 seller. This offering, known as a guilt offering for robbery, atones for his transgression only once he returns the money to the claimant. As the Ram say, Shevuout Daf for 11 9-7. The Mishnah continues. And what is the case of an oath on a deposit? It is where the claimant said to the defendant, "Give me my deposit, which is in your possession." The defendant replied, "On my oath, nothing of yours is in my possession." Or the defendant said to him, "Nothing of yours is in my possession." The claimant responded, "I administer an oath to you." And the defendant said, "Amen." In either case, the defendant is liable to bring a guilt offering if he lied. If the claimant administered an oath to him 5 times, his bia alav chamesh pa'amim. In a case where the defendant falsely denies a claim and takes an oath to that effect 4 or 5 times, or the claimant administers an oath 4 or 5 times and the defendant denies the claim each time, whether or not the oath was administered in the presence of court, the defendant is liable to bring a guilt offering for each false oath. Since, if he confessed after his denial that he would have been liable to pay, each subsequent denial is an attempt to exempt him from payment. He is therefore liable for each oath. Shevuout 7-9. When in the presence of a court, or not in the presence of a court, and the defendant falsely denied each claim, he is liable to bring a guilt offering for each and every denial. Rabbi Shimon said, what is the reason? It is due to the fact that he is able to retract and confess after each oath and repay the claimant. Since he does not do so, each oath is considered a separate denial of a monetary claim. If 5 people were suing him, in a case of 5 people sued someone and claimed, "Give us our deposit that is in your possession," and he falsely takes an oath asserting, "On my oath, you have nothing in my possession," he is liable to bring only 1 guilt offering. But if he says, "On my oath, you have nothing in my possession, nor do you," he is liable to bring a guilt offering for each and every claim that he falsely denied. This ruling is according to the first opinion in the Mishnah, Shevuout 7:10. And they said to him, "Give us back our deposit that is in your possession." And the defendant says, "On my oath, nothing of yours is in my possession." He is liable for only 1 false oath. But if he respond to each claimant, "On my oath, nothing of yours is in my possession," and "nothing of yours," and "nothing of yours," he is liable for his oath concerning each and every claim that he denied. Rabbi Eliezer says he is not liable for his oath concerning each claim unless he says, "On my oath," at the end. Rashi explains that by stating "on my oath" at the end of his denial, the defendant indicates that he intends to extend his oath to each of the claimants individually. In the Jewish Talmud, it explains that Rabbi Eliezer is referring to one who states, "On my oath" at the beginning and the end of the denial, i.e., he says, "On my oath, you have nothing in my possession, nor do you, on my oath." By beginning and ending his denial with an oath, he indicates that he intends to take an oath to each claimant. The Ramban and others support the language of the Bible Society of 38, supports Rashi's explanation of the denial, i.e. he says, "Nothing of yours is in my possession, and nothing of yours on my oath," so that it is clear that he has taken an oath to each one. Rabbi Shimon says he is not liable for each oath concerning each claim unless he says, "On my oath," to each and every claimant, i.e. he says, "On my oath, nothing of yours is in my possession," and "On my oath, nothing of yours," to each claimant separately. In a case where the claimant said, "Give me back my deposit," if one says to another, "Give me back my deposit, pledge, stolen item, and lost item that are in your possession," the defendant takes the false oath and says, "On my oath, you have nothing in my possession," the defendant is liable to bring only 1 guilt offering, even if each individual claim is very small. If some of the claims amounts to at least 1 pruta, they combine to render him liable. They have Shevuout 7:1 and pledge and stolen item and lost item that are in your possession, and the defendant responds, "On my oath, nothing of yours is in my possession," he is liable for only 1 false oath. But if he responds, "On my oath, I do not have in my possession your deposit or pledge, stolen item or lost item," he is liable for his oath concerning each and every claim. In a case where the claimant said, "Give me back my wheat and barley," if the claimant says, "Give me back my wheat, barley, and spelt are in your possession," and the defendant takes the false oath and says, "On my oath, you have nothing in my possession," he is liable to bring only 1 guilt offering. But if he responds, "On my oath, you have in my possession neither wheat nor barley nor spelt," and he is lying, he is liable to bring a guilt offering for each and every claim. Shevuout 7:13, spelt Kusmin. spell is called kusumit in the Bible is identified as the species Terracum spelled L. This grain has been long cultivated in Eretz Yisrael and the surrounding region. Spell is similar to wheat in both in the manner of its growth and its appearance, but it can be distinguished by its 2 rows in every stalk, which contain seeds tightly connected to the chaff. The cultivation of this species is fairly uncommon, both due to the difficulty involved in separating the chaff from the grain, and because its stalk crumbles easily into small pieces. And there's a picture here if you have to come on page 378. The Stanschelt's publication, that is, that are in your possession. If the defendant responds, on my oath nothing of yours is in my possession, he is liable for only one false oath. But if he responds, on my oath I do not have in my possession your wheat, barley or spelt, he is liable for his oath concerning each and every claim. Rabbi Meir says, the defendant says, on my oath I do not have in my possession a grain of wheat or grain of barley or grain of spelt, he is liable for his oath concerning each and every claim. The Mishnah continues, if one accuses another, you raped or you seduced my daughter, in the case of false oath about a claim that includes both a demand for compensation and a fine, even though admission on the part of the offended will exempt him from paying the fine, he is liable for taking a false oath on a deposit. For example, if one accused another, you raped my daughter, or you seduced my daughter, and the defendant says, I did not rape her, or I did not seduce her, and he takes a false oath to that effect, he is liable to bring a guilt offering, since even if he had confessed, he would have been liable to pay for the daughter's humiliation, the degradation resulting from being seduced or raped. Similarly, if the claimant says, you stole my ox, and the defendant says, I did not steal your ox, when he takes the false oath to that effect, he is liable to bring a guilt offering. This is because although he does not pay the fine of double payment based on his own admission, he pays a principal based on his own admission. Sefer Flower, Shevuout 8:3, and the other says, I did not rape and I did not seduce your daughter, to which the father replied, I ministered an oath to you. The defendant said, Amen. The defendant is liable to bring a guilt offering if it is a false oath. Rabbi Shimon deems it exempt, since one does not pay a fine based on his own admission. Kanas LP Atzmel. The regulations concerning fines differ from those of normal compensation in several respects. For example, only a court of ordained rabbis rather than ordinary sages or laymen may impose a fine. Furthermore, one who admits his transgression before he is convicted in court is not liable to pay a fine, although he must pay compensation for any damage caused. A payment is categorized as a fine when it is not equal to the precise value of the damage the guilty party caused. This is the case concerning all penalties in Torah, whether a specific amount to be paid is mandated, e.g. the fine for rape or seduction. See Exodus 22:15-16, Deuteronomy 22:28-29. Had he confessed, he would have been exempt from paying the fine. He is therefore not liable for his denial. The rabbi said to him, even though he does not pay the fine based on his own admission, he does pay compensation for humiliation, compensation for degradation resulting from being raped or seduced, which are mandatory claims and not fines based on his own admission. He is therefore liable for a false oath as he denied a monetary claim. Similarly, in a case where one person accuses another, you stole my ox, the defendant says, I did not steal your ox. Or if the claimant replied, I administered to you an oath to you, and the defendant said, Amen, he is liable. Although one who steals is required to return a stolen item and also to pay a fine equal to its value, and one does not pay a fine based on an admission, this is nevertheless a case where the defendant is denying a monetary claim, since he would be required to pay the principal based on his own admission, says the Rambam, to pay for the ox due to the theft, and to bring a guilt offering if he lied, since by his oath he is denying that he owes the value of the ox that he would have to pay if he admitted to stealing it. But in the case where the claimant accuses the defendant of stealing the ox and slaughtering or selling it, and the defendant says, I stole the ox but I did not slaughter or sell it. If one stole an ox and slaughtered or sold it, and the owner of the ox accused him, he stole my ox and slaughtered or sold it, and he replies, I stole the ox but I did not slaughter or sell it, and taken an oath to that effect, he is exempt from bringing a guilt offering. This is because he is admitted to slaughtering or selling the ox. He would have been exempt from the fine of fourfold or fivefold payment. Consequently, if he admitted to a monetary claim and he is exempt from liability for an oath and a deposit, he is liable to bring a sin offering for an oath and an utterance, since he took a false oath that he did not slaughter the ox. Shevuout 8:1, or sell it, and this is a lie. And if the claimant replied, I ministered an oath to you, and he said, Amen, then the defendant is exempt from the fivefold payment for slaughtering or selling an ox, since it is defined. If the claimant says, your ox killed my ox, If one person claims your ox killed my ox, and the defendant takes the false oath that the ox did not kill the claimant's ox, he is liable to bring a guilt offering, since even had he admitted it, he would have been liable to pay for the ox. So when the claimant accuses another of injuring him, and the defendant takes a false oath that he did not injure him, he is liable to bring a guilt offering. This ruling is in accordance with the Mishnah. Shevuout 8:4, and the defendant lies and says, "It did not kill your ox," to which the claimant replied, I administered an oath to you, and he said, Amen, then he is liable for his false oath. But if the claimant says, your ox killed my Canaanite slave, if one person claims your ox killed my Canaanite slave, and the defendant takes the false oath that they did not kill the slave, or if the Canaanite slave accuses his master, you knocked out my tooth, or you blinded my eye, and the master denies the charge and takes the false oath to that effect, the defendant is exempt from bringing a guilt offering for false oaths in the deposit, because the claims were for fines, which are not paid based on one's own admission. He is liable to bring a sin offering for taking a false oath and an utterance. Shevuout 8:2, and you are therefore liable to me to pay me a fine of 30 shekels, and he lies and says, I did not kill your slave. So if the claimant replies, I missed an oath to you, and he says, Amen, then he is exempt, because payment for the slave is a fine. If the claimant said to him, you injured me and caused me a wound, and the defendant says, I did not injure you, and I did not cause you a wound, to which the claimant replied, I administered an oath to you, and he said, Amen, he is liable. But if once a Canaanite slave said to him, you knocked out my tooth, or you blinded my eye, and you are therefore required to emancipate me, and he says, I did not knock out your tooth, or I did not blind your eye, to which the slave replied, I administered an oath to you, and he said, Amen, he is exempt from bringing a guilt offering, even though he lied, since the obligation to emancipate one's slave in these cases is a penalty. This is the principle. For any claim that the defendant would have to pay based on his admission, he is liable to bring a guilt offering for taking a false oath concerning that claim, and for any claim that he would not pay based on his own admission, but would pay based only on the testimony of witnesses, he is exempt from bringing a guilt offering for taking a false oath concerning that claim. The Gemara. Rav Acha bar Huna v'Rav Shmuel b'rei. The Rabba bar Chana v'Rav Yitzchak b'rei the Rav Yehuda. Tana Shevuout studied the tractate Shevuout in the study hall of Rabba. Rav Kahana encountered them and inquired with regard to a matter in the Mishnah. He said, that's the end of the Omid. Thank you for listening and wish you a very good day. All the best. Bye.